In this video, we're going to explore how we draw these maps and globes using D3 and how we move from the world of React to the world of D3. They both have their own very special programming paradigms, and I'll show you how we move from one to the other. So just to recap, we're on our world page here and we've got show map. So it comes into here, it says show map, so we're going to display the world map in here, and this display gets displayed there. So this is how we build a map. So if we open the world map component, this again is a functional JavaScript, a functional React functional component, and it takes some properties in. It uses the location and it uses the set location. Now, I don't like the way that's written. I think it would be better to write it like this, remembering that most of these React hooks that allow you to update things give you a value and then give you a way of updating that value. And we're using the location, which is this area here. And what we want to do is set the location, but we're not too worried in this component about reading it. So we use a single underscore just to indicate the fact that we're not interested and we can throw that value away. So we're just using set location, and set location is here, and we just want to handle a selection, and it says next path country equals country ID. So basically when I double click on a country in a map, it will send a message back up, fire off this handle selection, set the location, next path is country, and it will change this, drops back into the visualization, and the visualization changes. So that's how that works. And then we just set this all up, we just pass our properties directly down, and this is a way of saying I don't know what I'm being given, but I'm just going to pass it all on to something underneath, and I'm just going to add on my handle selection, which is the purpose of this component, to add extra functionality. And we're doing something called a flat projection. So we're taking the 3D world, and if you imagine an orange, we're peeling the skin off the orange and just flattening it out to give us something that we can stick to the computer screen to give us a two-dimensional image. So this is our flat projection. I'll just open that up. And this again is a React function, and I'll go through and explain what it's doing. So it's taken all the properties that come in, and we're just expanding them out with names, so that we're taking in countries, markers, selected country if there is one selected, selected state, a selected city, so on and so forth, because this flat projection is going to service a lot of higher level components. So it's going to be used to do a flat projection for the world, or a state, or a city, or a country, and it's going to be able to project with or without markers. So that's why we're unpacking all of this. And now this is a difficult thing to explain. When we move from the world of React to D3, D3 needs to work with a document node, a DOM node. And so we need to know what DOM node is being displayed in the application for us to hook into. And if we go just down to the bottom, this component, this React component, just returns an empty SVG with a name and some IDs, and width and height set to the width and height of the available area. This piece of magic here, called use reference, is our way of capturing and letting React tell us the DOM element that it actually creates after it does all its magic. So we say the reference equals target SVG. Target SVG is a use reference hook. So every time, remember, every time this function would give a different result, it re-renders. So if React was to create a different DOM element for this, it would re-render all of this. So this target SVG gives us the rendered SVG in the screen that we need to work with, that we can pass down into the world of D3. We're just going to remember the height and width of the window, and we've got a function that updates the width and the height, and we just add an event listener, so every time the window resizes it updates the width and height, goes back into this, re-triggers everything, all falls through, gets redrawn. So if I was just to change it, it just redraws that element, sends all the information down to D3, and D3 does a redraw for us. So render map is now how we're going to, one thing I've forgotten before that, use effect. Use effect is a hook, and it's a function that runs after React has built everything. So React is going to build all of this, just a piece of empty SVG, and when it's finished, it will fire this function off. We set up the event listeners, we register the function to update the width and the height, and it goes back around, runs again, pulls out if there's a selected country on a list of states and cities, and then we pass this down into D3. And D3 needs a big long list of things to work with. It needs the target SVG, so where I'm going to start drawing on the map, a height and a width, what to do if something's selected, a list of countries, a list of markers, which are the colours that appear on top of the map, a list of states, so if I'm drilled down and I want to display a list of states, a list of cities, a selected country if there is one, a selected state if there is one, a selected city, and a boolean yes no whether or not to draw small or big markers. So we'll go and open this up, and render map. This now moves into the world of D3. So this is a plain old function. This is a function that runs once when React has set up the DOM node, and D3 will now take over. So the way this works is D3 takes in all these values, and they're all listed out here. So the first thing we do is we say, is there anything selected? So there's a selected city, state or country, and in our case there is nothing selected. Just bring that down. It's very slow, this in browser preview. So nothing is selected. Now we need to move into the world of D3. D3 works with selections. D3 stands for something that I've completely forgotten, but it's documents and data and something else. And the way it works is it works with selections. If you remember a Venn diagram, so there's a selection that is DOM elements, data, and an overlap. So first thing we do is we tell D3 to select our target SVG, and that gives us a D3 selection. When we're in the world of D3, we always work with selections. So that gives us our SVG, and it's empty. Then we create a scaling ratio, which just puts the map roughly into the right zoom in and out, and it's a magic number that I just came to by changing things, and you'll have your own magic number, and I just tweak it to get it right roughly for my displays. So that gives us a scaling, so that's how far we want to zoom in. So with D3, the first thing we do is we get a projection, and a projection is this unzipping of the orange and taking the skin off, and it's a mathematical function. I'm just going to show you the GraphQL. So the GraphQL brings back an outline for a country that is a series of numbers, 66.51. And what the projection does is it works out if I want on my map to draw a dot at 6651 longitude, it works out which pixel to switch on and off. That's what the projection is. So we take the D3 library, we fire off a function called Mercator, which gets us the Mercator projection, which is the way we unzip the orange, and that returns a projection called D3. A projection. The way D3 works is we could be writing get Mercator, bring back a function, scaling, and other things, blah, 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 and passing in lots of different parameters to set up that function. So we pass these setup into this function that brings us back a function. D3 works slightly differently. So D3 works by we create the function and then at a later date we set up different bits. So rather than passing values into the function, this function's returned and it has other functions, a bit like the properties we added to the function. So we can call functions on a function with this dot notation, and we can say this is the scaling we want, and we want to translate halfway across, halfway down. So that gives us our projection. Once we have our projection, then we need to create another function that takes the 66.51 and turns that into our screen. So the Mercator works out how to unzip the orange, and then the path will take all of those unzippings and turn what is this JavaScript object, an array of arrays, and it will turn it into a path. And if I just going to go into this, let's turn off this, and we will actually inspect this element for Afghanistan, and if you can see here, it has a property called D, and D has this magic inside of it, which basically is move to pixel 1 blah 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 blah, then draw a line to this pixel, then draw a line here, da, 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 and then go all the way around and close it off. So this is the data for the path, and it's in this special format. What this path function does is it takes the projection function and will apply it to our data, which comes back from here and turns this array of arrays, so it turns that into this. Whoops, into this. So that's what that function's doing. So we've set it all up, we're creating a path function, we're going to use the projection that we've created here. So we've set everything up, and the first thing we'd do is recenter the map. We only do that if we've got something selected, which we don't. Next thing I do is I remove all the paths. I just clean it all up and start all over again. Don't really need to do this. D3 is very clever, and you don't need to do that. Just in this proof of concept, that's what I'm doing because it makes it easier. And the first thing is we need to draw the globe, and the globe is just the background. So the blue stuff. We'll draw the graphQL, which is these lines. I won't go into those at the moment because it's a little tricky understanding why they are the way they are. They're very small functions, but they don't really make sense. It makes more sense if we just go in and draw the countries. So how do we draw all of these shapes? So we'll go in and draw the countries. So draw countries is a function that takes SVG path, list of countries, a selected country, and something to do if we select a country, i.e. if we double click on one. If there aren't any countries, just return, don't do anything. So that's the common pattern I use. First thing we need to do, with all functional programming, we've got to convert from one type of thing to another type of thing. And D3 works with an object called Geojson, and we've got a list of countries. So we've got to convert our list of countries into a list of Geojson objects. So the first thing we do is we get our countries and we just run it through a filter. And this basically filter says if there isn't an outline, don't just throw it away. So filter out everything that doesn't have an outline. So if any of our countries are coming back down and they don't have the outline in it, we don't need to render it. And this is just a very shorthand way of doing it. And then we map it, we convert from a country to a Geojson object. So the first thing we do is we just pass the outline. So we just show you what the outline looks like. The outline is this object. It's of type multi-polygon, and this is an array of its coordinates. So we just get that. Turn that into a Geojson object because it's already in a Geojson format from the server. And then we just set some properties because Geojson likes to work with properties. So the properties of this Geojson object are its name, is the country name, its ID is the country ID, and its type is country. So we now have a list of Geojson objects that we can render. This is where it gets slightly crazy. So SVG is our SVG selection that comes down from above, and it's got nothing in it. Remember, it's just an SVG with a load of empty groups. So what we do is we say select the map display countries, so we select that group and then select all the paths inside of it and apply the data, this list of Geojson objects, to it to give us a new selection. If you think of a Venn diagram, we've got a list of DOM nodes, which are none, and we've got a list of country Geojson objects, which is 254, and we merge them together. So we have a selection, a combination of the two. And the way we work with D3 is we say, this selection, get me all the things that are entering in, i.e. all the things where there's data but no DOM element. So this is everything new. And add a path for each one of those. So it adds a path. Remember, we've got the path here. Adds the path, sets some attributes, sets its class, sets fill and stroke. Normally I would pop those into the class, but just when I'm developing out, I keep them as attributes, and then once it's all stabilized out, they go up to the class because it runs slightly faster than having lots of attributes. And then lastly, we're saying D, our data, is our path function that we've passed in. And D3 is clever enough to say, take that Geojson object, apply the path function, which knows all about Geojson, and return me the SVG instructions to draw that line in the right place. Then we have the selection again, and we say exit, i.e. anything that is a DOM element but now no longer has a country. So maybe we've taken a couple of countries off. You might want to do that to speed things up, and then that just removes that from the display. So that's how we work with D3. We select something, we apply data, we get all the things that are coming in, and we set up their properties, get all the things that are leaving, we throw them away. Then what we do, once we've added the new things, taken the things away, we just go over that list again. So we select all the paths, we've added them, we've removed them, and we've got a list now. So we select all the paths, and we say, and we give them some functionality, and we say on mouse over, make sure the fill is dark green. So that's how this works. So each of these SVG paths knows that if the mouse goes over them, they've got to go dark green, and when the mouse leaves, they go back to their normal colour, and when you double click on them, they fire off the on selection event and pass the value up. Then lastly, we just do some magic, and I'll show you what that magic is on the main screen. But basically what we want to do is we want to make certain things more important and certain things less important, and we're doing this by changing the opacity. So if we go here in GeoTracker, if we click on a country, so what we're doing is we're fading out things and bringing things in, and if I pop terrorism on, it takes a few seconds for it to get it back from the server. D3. It's just done a combination of a couple of 100,000 events and just check to see if they're in all these geoshapes. It's pretty quick. First time, if we was to spin that round again, it should all be cached and it should all be instant. And what we're doing is, if you look at this square here, what we're doing is we're saying if we've got an overlay, just fade that back out because the overlay is more important. So that's what we're doing here. We're saying if there's a selected country and we're going to fade some things out. So this says if there's a selected country, we want to fade them out, and then we'll do some more fades here. See? And what we do is we're just taking, saying if we've got markers and states and we're just going through and fading things out so certain things have prominence. So we've drawn our countries, we draw our states. In this particular instance, there's no states, there's no cities to draw, there's no markers to draw, there's no events to draw. Events are just the little circles to say where every event happened. None of these to draw, nothing to fade out. So it's drawn all of this, and then lastly, manage map. And manage map, what that does is we hand over the control of this area to D3 for it to manage. I'll just show on the main screen, and if we go back to the world, take off our overlay, manage map allows us to zoom in, drag things about, zoom back out. So what we're doing is we're handing over the management of this area to D3. This is how we do it, and this is how we do it. So manage map, what we're doing is we down here we say D3 create me a zooming function. Scale extent, that basically says how far I can zoom out, how far I can zoom in, and when you receive a zoom message, call the zoom function. And the zoom function is just a function I've created, or I'm currying, and I'm saying the SVG that's passed in is always applied to this function here, and basically it says select all the paths, make sure they're a non-scaling stroke. That means when we zoom in they stay the same size, else they get bigger and bigger and more blurry, and apply a magic transform that D3 knows about because it's listening and managing everything. And the same with the circles, select all the circles and transform them. So I'll just show you that. So it's managing this because these are all just shapes, and it's just applying CSS transformations that make it look like we're zooming in and zooming out. But all that's happening is CSS is being applied to a number of shapes to transform them. So that's how we manage the map. That's how we render the map, and that's how I like to do it in a functional style. So I tend to try and write things so that it's a recipe, so you can read what's happening, and that's how D3 creates a simple map. I'll explain how it does a globe in the next video.